That year Buffett moved the partnership office from his home to Kiewit Plaza in Omaha, where his office remains today. The following year, Buffett made one of his most famous investments, one that served to boost his already growing reputation. One of the worst corporate scandals in the 1960s occurred when the Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Company, led by Tino De Angelis, discovered it could obtain loans based on the inventory of its salad oil. Using one simple fact, that oil floats on top of water, De Angelis rigged the game. He built a refinery in New Jersey, put in 139 five-story storage tanks to hold soybean oil, then filled the tanks with water topped with just a few feet of salad oil. When inspectors arrived to confirm inventory, Allied employees would clamber up to the top of the tanks, dip in a measuring stick, and call out a false number to the inspectors on the ground. When the scandal broke, it was learned that Bank of America, Bank Leumi, American Express, and other international trading companies had backed over $150 million in fraudulent loans. American Express was one of the biggest casualties of what became known as the salad oil scandal. The company lost $58 million and its share price dropped by over 50%. If Buffett had learned anything from Ben Graham, it was this: when the stock of a strong company sells below its intrinsic value, act decisively. Buffett was aware of the $58 million loss, but what he did not know was how customers viewed the scandal. So he hung out at the cash registers of Omaha restaurants and discovered there was no drop-off in the use of the famous American Express green card. He also visited several banks in the area and learned that the financial scandal was having no impact on the sale of American Express travelers' checks. Returning to his office, Buffett promptly invested $13 million, a whopping 25% of the partnership assets, in shares of American Express. Over the next 2 years, the shares tripled and the partners netted a cool $20 million in profit. It was pure Graham, and pure Buffett. In the beginning, Buffett confined the partnership to buying undervalued securities and certain merger arbitrage announcements. But in the 5th year, he purchased his first controlling interest in a business, the Dempster Mill Manufacturing Company, a maker of farm equipment. Next he began buying shares in an ailing New England textile company called Berkshire Hathaway, and by 1965 he had control of the business. In differential calculus, an inflection point is a point on a curve at which the curvature changes from being plus to minus or minus to plus. Inflection points can also occur in companies, industries, economies, geopolitical situations, and individuals as well. I believe the 1960s proved to be Buffett's inflection point, where Buffett the investor evolved into Buffett the business person. It was also a period when the market itself reached an inflection point. Since 1956, the valuation strategy outlined by Graham and used by Buffett had dominated the stock market. But by the mid-1960s a new era was unfolding. It was called the go-go years. The go-go referred to growth stocks. It was a time when greed began driving the market and where fast money was made and lost in the pursuit of high-flying performance stocks. Despite the underlying shift in market psychology, the Buffett partnership continued to post outstanding results. By the end of 1966, the partnership had gained 1,156%, 704% for limited partners, blitzing the Dow, which was up 123% over the same period. Even so, Buffett was becoming increasingly uneasy. Whereas the market had been dancing to the principles outlined by Graham, the new music being played in the stock market made little sense to Buffett. In 1969, Buffett decided to end the investment partnership. He found the market highly speculative and worthwhile values increasingly scarce. By the late 1960s, the stock market was dominated by highly priced growth stocks. The Nifty 50 were on the tip of every investor's tongue. Stocks like Avon, Polaroid, and Xerox were trading at 50 to 100 times earnings. Buffett mailed a letter to his partners confessing that he was out of step with the current market environment. On one point, however, I am clear, he said. I will not abandon a previous approach whose logic I understand, although I find it difficult to apply, even though it may mean foregoing large and apparently easy profits. to embrace an approach which I don't fully understand, have not practiced successfully, and which possibly could lead to substantial permanent loss of capital. At the beginning of the partnership, Buffett had set a goal of outperforming the Dow by an average of 10 percentage points each year. Between 1957 and 1969, he did beat the Dow, not by 10 percentage points a year but by 22. When the partnership disbanded, investors received their portions. Some were given an education in municipal bonds and others were directed to a money manager. The only individual whom Buffett recommended was Bill Irwin, his old classmate at Columbia. Irwin agreed to manage some of the partners' money, and thus was born the Sequoia Fund. Other members of the partnership, including Buffett, took their portions in Berkshire Hathaway stock. Buffett's share of the partnership had grown to $25 million, and that was enough to give him control of Berkshire Hathaway. When Buffett disbanded the partnership, many thought the money changer's best days were behind him. In reality, he was just getting started. Berkshire Hathaway. The original company, Berkshire Cotton Manufacturing, was incorporated in 1889. 40 years later, Berkshire combined operations with several other textile mills, resulting in one of New England's largest industrial companies. During this period, Berkshire produced approximately 25% of the country's cotton needs and absorbed 1% of New England's electrical capacity. In 1955, Berkshire merged with Hathaway Manufacturing, and the name was subsequently changed to Berkshire Hathaway. Unfortunately, the years following the merger were dismal. In less than 10 years, stockholders' equity dropped by half and losses from operations exceeded $10 million. During the next 20 years, Buffett, along with Ken Chase, who managed the textile group, labored intensely to turn around the New England textile mills. Results were disappointing. Returns on equity struggled to reach double digits. By the 1970s, shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway began to question the wisdom of retaining an investment in textiles. Buffett made no attempt to hide the difficulties and on several occasions explained his thinking. The textile mills were the largest employer in the area, the workforce was an older age group that possessed relatively non-transferable skills, management had shown a high degree of enthusiasm, the unions were being reasonable, and, very importantly, Buffett believed that some profits could be realized from the textile business. However, he made it clear that he expected the textile group to earn positive returns on modest capital expenditures. I won't close down a business of subnormal profitability merely to add a fraction of a point to our corporate returns, said Buffett. I also feel it is inappropriate for even an exceptionally profitable company to fund an operation once it appears to have unending losses in prospect. Adam Smith would disagree with my first proposition and Karl Marx would disagree with my second. The middle ground, he explained, is the only position that leaves me comfortable. As Berkshire Hathaway entered the 1980s, Buffett was coming to grips with certain realities. First, the very nature of the textile business made higher returns on equity improbable. Textiles are commodities, and commodities by definition have a difficult time distinguishing their products from those of competitors. Foreign competition, employing a cheap labor force, was squeezing profit margins. Second, in order to stay competitive, the textile mills would require significant capital improvements, a prospect that is frightening in an inflationary environment and disastrous if the business returns are anemic. Buffett was faced with a difficult choice. If he made large capital contributions to the textile division in order to remain competitive, Berkshire would be left with poor returns on what was becoming an expanding capital base. If he did not reinvest, Berkshire's textile mills would become less competitive with other domestic textile manufacturers. Whether Berkshire reinvested or not, foreign competition continued to have an advantage by employing a cheaper labor force. By 1980, the annual report revealed ominous clues for the future of the textile group. That year, the group lost its prestigious lead-off position in the chairman's letter. By the next year, the textile group was not discussed in the letter at all. Then, the inevitable, in July 1985, Buffett closed the books on the textile group, thus ending a business that had begun some 100 years earlier. Despite the misfortunes of the textile group, the experience was not a complete failure. First, Buffett learned a valuable lesson about corporate turnarounds: they seldom succeed. Second, the textile group did generate enough capital in the early years to buy an insurance company, and that is a much brighter story. Insurance operations. In March 1967, Berkshire Hathaway purchased, for $8.6 million, the outstanding stock of two insurance companies headquartered in Omaha, National Indemnity Company and National Fire and Marine Insurance Company. It was the beginning of Berkshire Hathaway's phenomenal success story. To appreciate the phenomenon, it is important to recognize the true value of owning an insurance company. Insurance companies are sometimes good investments, sometimes not. They are, however, always terrific investment vehicles. Policyholders, in paying premiums, provide a constant stream of cash. Insurance companies invest this cash until claims are filed. Because of the uncertainty of when claims will occur, insurance companies opt to invest in liquid securities, primarily short-term fixed-income securities, longer-dated bonds, and stocks. Thus Warren Buffett acquired not only two modestly healthy companies, but also a cast-iron vehicle for managing investments. In 1967, the two insurance companies had a bond portfolio worth more than $24.7 million and a stock portfolio worth $7.2 million. In 2 years, the combined portfolio approached $42 million. This was a handsome portfolio for a seasoned stock picker like Buffett. He had already experienced some limited success managing the textile company's securities portfolio. When Buffett took control of Berkshire in 1965, the company had $2.9 million in marketable securities. By the end of the first year, Buffett had enlarged the securities account to $5.4 million. In 1967, the dollar return from investing was 3 times the return of the entire textile division, which had 10 times the equity base of the common stock portfolio. It has been argued that when Buffett entered the insurance business and exited the textile business, he merely exchanged one commodity for another. Insurance companies, like textiles, are selling a product that is indistinguishable. Insurance policies are standardized and can be copied by anyone. There are no trademarks, patents, advantages in location, or raw materials that distinguish one from another. It is easy to get licensed, and insurance rates are an open book. Often the most distinguishable attribute of an insurance company is its personnel. The efforts of individual managers have an enormous impact on an insurance company's performance. Over the years, Buffett has added several insurance companies to the Berkshire Insurance Group. One prominent addition, now well known thanks to a clever advertising campaign, is Geico. By 1991, Berkshire Hathaway owned nearly half of Geico's outstanding common shares. For the next 3 years, the company's impressive performance continued to climb, so did Buffett's interest. In 1994, Berkshire announced it owned 51% of the company, and serious discussion began on Geico joining the Berkshire family. 2 years later, Buffett wrote a check for $2.3 billion and Geico became a wholly owned business. Buffett was not done. In 1998, he paid 7 times the amount he had spent to buy the remaining outstanding shares of Geico, about $16 billion in Berkshire Hathaway stock, to acquire a reinsurance company called General Re. It was his biggest acquisition up to that date. Over the years, Buffett has continued to buy insurance companies, but without question his smartest acquisition was a person, Ajit Jain, whom he hired to run the Berkshire Hathaway Reinsurance Group. Ajit, born in 1951, earned an engineering degree at the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology. He worked for IBM for 3 years, then enrolled at Harvard to gain a business degree. Although Ajit had no insurance background, Buffett quickly recognized his brilliance. From a starting point in 1985, Ajit built the reinsurance group's float, premiums earned but losses not paid, to $34 billion in a little over 20 years. According to Buffett, Ajit insures risks that no one else has the desire or the capital to take on. His operation combines capacity, speed, decisiveness, and most importantly, brains in a manner that is unique in the insurance business. 22 not a day goes by without Buffett and Ajit having a conversation. To give you an idea of Agit's value, in the 2009 Berkshire Annual Report, Buffett wrote, "If Charlie, I and Agit are ever in a sinking boat, and you can only save one of us, swim to Agit." The man and his company. Warren Buffett is not easy to describe. Physically he is unremarkable, with looks that are more grandfatherly than corporate titan. Intellectually he is considered a genius, yet his down-to-earth relationship with people is truly uncomplicated. He is simple, straightforward, forthright, and honest. He displays an engaging combination of sophisticated dry wit and cornball humor. He has a profound reverence for those things logical and a foul distaste for imbecility. He embraces the simple and avoids the complicated. Reading his annual reports, one is struck by how comfortable Buffett is quoting the Bible, John Maynard Keynes, or Mae West. Of course the operable word is reading. Each report is 60 to 70 pages of dense information, no pictures, no color graphics, no charts. Those disciplined enough to start on page 1 and to continue uninterrupted are rewarded with a healthy dose of financial acumen, folksy humor, and unabashed honesty. Buffett is very candid in his reporting. He emphasizes both the pluses and the minuses of Berkshire's businesses. He believes that people who own stock in Berkshire Hathaway are owners of the company, and he tells them as much as he would like to be told if he were in their shoes. The company that Buffett directs is the embodiment of his personality, his business philosophy, which is identically tied to his investment philosophy, and his own unique style. Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated is complex but not complicated. There are just two major parts, the operating businesses and the stock portfolio, made possible by the earnings of the non-insurance businesses and the insurance company's float. Running through it all is Warren Buffett's down-to-earth way of looking at businesses he's considering buying outright, a business he's evaluating for common stock purchase, or the management of his own company. Today, Berkshire Hathaway is divided into three major groups: its insurance operations, its regulated capital-intensive businesses, which includes Mid-American Energy and the railroad Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and manufacturing, services and retailing operations, with products ranging from lollipops to jet airplanes. Collectively, these businesses generated, in 2012, $10.8 billion in earnings for Berkshire Hathaway compared to the $399 million Buffett the business person earned in 1988. At year-end 2012, Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio of investments had a market value of $87.6 billion against a cost basis of $49.8 billion. 25 years ago, in 1988, Buffett the investor had a portfolio valued at $3 billion against a cost basis of $1.3 billion. Over the past 48 years, starting in 1965, the year Buffett took control of Berkshire Hathaway, the book value of the company has grown from $19 to $114,214 per share, a compounded annual gain of 19.7%. During that period, the Standard & Poor's, S&P 500 index gained 9.4%, dividends included. That is a 10.3% relative outperformance earned for almost 5 decades. As I said earlier, when the money changer shut down the Buffett partnership, he was just getting started. 5 Sigma event. For years academicians and investment professionals have debated the validity of what has come to be known as the efficient market theory. This controversial theory suggests that analyzing stocks is a waste of time because all available information is already reflected in current prices. Those who adhere to this theory claim, only partly in jest, that investment professionals could throw darts at a page of stock quotes and pick winners just as successfully as a seasoned financial analyst who spends hours poring over the latest annual report or quarterly statement. Yet the success of some individuals who continually beat the indexes, most notably Warren Buffett, suggests that the efficient market theory is flawed. Efficient market theoreticians counter that it is not the theory that is flawed. Rather, they say, individuals like Buffett are a 5 Sigma event, a statistical phenomenon so rare it practically never occurs. 23 It would be easy to side with those who claim Buffett is a statistical rarity. No one has ever come close to repeating his investment performance, Whether it was the 13-year results from the Buffett partnership or the almost 5-decade performance record at Berkshire Hathaway. When we tabulate the results of almost every investment professional, noting their inability to beat the major indexes over time, it prompts the question, is the stock market indeed unassailable, or is it a question of the methods used by most investors? Last, we have Buffett's own words to consider. What we do is not beyond anyone else's competence. I feel the same way about managing that I do about investing. It is just not necessary to do extraordinary things to get extraordinary results. 24 Most would dismiss Buffett's explanation as nothing more than his special brand of Midwestern humility. But I have taken his word on the matter, and it is the subject of this book.